Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to be reading my comments to the FCC that I wrote almost about a month ago. There's also a few corrections that I want to just add publicly in this video. But other than that, I think it's a pretty decent proposal to the FCC in their comment seeking period. So you can read what I'm going to be reading. It's on my website. It's also technically on the FCC's website. It's available if you go to the docket and you scroll down. You'll see DJR Technologies LLC. That's me. That's my company. It's also on my website at this link, so you can just type in that or click the link in the description below, and it'll take you right there. All right, so I'm not going to read any of this beginning part. I'm just going to do the part that actually is about ATSC 3.0 and the subject matter at hand. So yeah, if you want to read about my company and things like that, then, you can read that beginning section yourself. As for the response to the FCC, I'm going to start right here, right at number 3 here with ATSC 3.0 mandate. DGR Technologies urges the FCC to consider a more nuanced approach than the one outlined by the NAB. Specifically, there should be consideration for a tiered approach based on the portion of spectrum utilized for over-the-air TV broadcasting. The Commission should consider an ATSC 3.0 mandate for the low VHF band, RF channels 2 through 6, regardless of station type, full power, Class A, translator, LPTV, by the 2028 and 2030 deadlines, respectively, due to the incredible challenges that portion of the TV band faces. Most consumers do not have antennas that can adequately receive signals utilizing RF channels 2 through 6, which inherently makes consumers less likely to receive low VHF signals. The low VHF band is further at a disadvantage with the strong levels of background and impulse noise that, when coupled with the technical limitations of the ATSC 1.0 standard, makes quality reception nearly impossible. In addition, the Commission should consider a minimum time interleaving requirement of hybrid time interleaving HTI with the option to use extended time interleaving ETI if the station's parameters allow, as a way to make the signal more immune to impulse noise. So the reason why I brought up these varying options is because the way that the ATSC standard is written for ATSC 3.0, you're not allowed to use extended time interleaving if you want to use layered division multiplexing. And there's a few other quirks with these as well. It's also important that when you're making these proposals, you actually understand the technology itself and you don't just come up with a bunch of garbage that isn't technically sound. So I tried to do my best to get in the little nuances and get in the little, quirks of things, because, that is something that I think would be a beneficial use of the public airways using LDM. And if we want to make LDM as robust as possible, then, really, according to the standard, you would want to have that with HTI. Now, it's actually funny. The only reason why ETI isn't used isn't because of like some technical limitation. Like in theory, ETI could be implemented with layered division multiplexing. It's just that the memory requirements of such a broadcast, it would need like many gigabytes of RAM, and you'd be using that up quick. Because extended time interleaving is you're capturing a big portion of that data stream before you're actually displaying it. So you're caching a lot of that. And then on top of that, with LDM, you've got all of this extra data capacity in there too. So the ATSC basically didn't want to build a standard that was overly complex with that memory requirement. So, unfortunately, we can't use ETI with LDM, but if there's revisions in the future, maybe that's something that they could revise when, RAM and memory chips become even more, SoCs come with even more RAM than they did when they were building this standard in the mid 2010s. So, that's unfortunately where we're at right now, but I wanted to put that little tidbit in there for some additional context. In addition, the commission should consider a minimum receive SNR threshold for the physical layer pipe PLP containing the one mandated video stream of no more than 0 dB SNR rise and fading. So the reason why, and you'll notice that in this submission, I am talking a lot about the one mandated video stream. I think this is a very important concept because what's going to happen is there's going to be some frustration on both sides. It's almost like politics. You've got the people typically on the broadcast side that want DRM, and you've got the consumer base that doesn't want DRM. You've got these two little political factions within this broadcast, ecosystem. And the way that I look at it is I want to try to appease both sides. How do we try to make the public feel like they've won a little bit? And how do we make the broadcasters feel like they've won a little bit? So, what I would like to see is kind of going back to the root FCC definition of what a TV broadcaster is. And that is a broadcaster that disperses within their 6 megahertz of channel allocation one TV stream. Like, heaven forbid we have one TV stream per ATSC 3.0 station that is not encrypted with DRM, that has a minimum SNR requirement that is not absurdly high, that is actually reasonable, that that any RF channel you could tune into, you will at least get one channel that has a really good SNR and no encryption. I think that would be a very good middle ground. And this goes back to the whole purpose behind the public airwaves, which was back in the day, back in the 1930s and the 1940s, was to have literally one TV channel per 6 megahertz channel. And that was a technical limitation back then, but that ethos, I think we can kind of drive into this modern interpretation of what rule making could be. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more with DRM, but this is kind of just a little bit of a taste of what's to come. I really do think there should be SNR caps for a one mandated channel, which in turn would basically require a PLP SNR requirement, which, you kind of have to sit back and realize that they were given this radio resource for free. They're not like the cellular carriers that had to spend billions of dollars to acquire the right to emit radiation within this certain fragment of possible frequency ranges. They were given that chance to do this for free. In turn, for public services, you can monetize it the way that you see fit, whether it's with donations, whether it's with advertising, based on the class of license that you received. Your job as a broadcaster is to provide services to the public and make these services in the public interest. And I think some of these broadcasters are losing that core value of the reason why they're even doing this to begin with. My opinion would be, if you really want to have encryption on everything and to have the SNR thresholds at whatever you see fit, then buy your own spectrum. Don't use the public spectrum that's meant for the public consumption, that's meant for the general public to use and enjoy. Use it on private frequencies that you bought. But guess what? They don't want to do that. I don't think they want to buy all of this spectrum because they probably wouldn't be able to turn a profit. So they're doing this based on the free spectrum, which is not good. And that context needs to be in there. I go on to say these steps are necessary to ensure consumers have a high quality of service when receiving channels from stations operating on the low VHF band. Technical steps can be taken to ensure this has a minimal effect on overall station capacity, because I know what the critics are going to say. The broadcast companies are going to, do a comment back to this if they see it and say, well, this could hinder our ability to adequately send out 4K video, or it won't allow us to have enough data capacity for our data casting ambitions. No, it won't. This could be implemented. There are literally thousands of scenarios where this could be implemented in a very low capacity manner that would be very useful to the public using very little data capacity. And any argument that you would have against that would basically show that you're not very competent with the standard. So, or you don't care about the public and you just want to completely get rid of any obligations that you have. Due to the severity of current reception conditions using ATSC 1.0 with this allocation, there is a chance viewership of low VHF signals would increase with the current state of ATSC 3.0 device penetration due to a higher potential for adequate signal reception. I kind of wanted that to be in there just to show the FCC and just to show like broadcasters and the public that the low VHF band is so hard to receive right now. It is so incredibly difficult to receive that literally just switching over to ATSC 3.0 with current devices could actually be more significant than just keeping ATSC 1.0 on the air. And I think this is also crucial. If the commission decides to not implement these stricter considerations on this ban for the benefit of consumers, the question should be raised as to why we are still using 54 to 72, 76 to 88 megahertz allocations to begin with. This is very important. FCC, this is valuable spectrum. So I look at the low VHF band as kind of like swampland. It's land that nobody wants to build on. It would take a lot of work to get it. Maybe you have to not broadcast as much data out in order to increase robustness, but it is still valuable land that could be built on. And I know that, I had a discussion with Dr. Kumar Ramaswamy from iGolgi, and he discussed how low VHF could be better used in rural environments, and then only UHF and then maybe a little bit of high VHF be used in urban. I actually think that if the signal is implemented in a very robust way, if you implement that low VHF signal based on the ATSC 3.0 specified ways to make signals very immune to impulse noise, very immune to all of the things that would make low VHF very, very difficult to receive, you could actually have an experience where low VHF is actually received decently well in an urban environment if implemented properly. So I don't really see, I think low VHF is great in rural, hilly, mountainous and areas, but if we're at a point where we don't have any more available spectrum, why not utilize low VHF in a robust manner to add a couple few megabits per second of data capacity? I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities to be had. The commission should mandate a transition to ATSC 3.0 by the 2028 and 2030 deadlines, respectively, for full power and Class A TV stations operating on the high VHF band, RF channels 7 through 13, and the UHF band, RF channels 14 through 36. And allow TV translators and LPTV stations operating in this frequency range to use a standard of their choice. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the low VHF band is at a point right now where it is so bad with ATSC 1.0 where the only way forward is to have everything operating on the low VHF band to utilize ATSC 3.0 in a robust manner with some additional parameters to ensure that the public can even receive services operating on those frequency ranges. And then for the other frequency ranges, the stations that have a lot more requirements with them, the full power stations, the Class A stations, these stations should be mandated to switch over to ATSC 3.0. Now, the TV translator stations, the low power stations, these stations tend to not have the biggest margins. These stations usually have leaner operations. I don't think they should be forced to move over to ATSC 3.0, and I would actually like to see a scenario where ATSC 1.0 in innovative ways is utilized on these community small stations. If they don't have the money to upgrade to ATSC 3.0, maybe that station has a little bit of extra cash to experiment with HEVC, or maybe sending broadcast apps with their low power TV station. You don't need an ATSC 3.0 signal to have broadcast apps. So there's a lot of cool, innovative things that could be done. I mean, low power stations in 10 years could all be ATSC 1.0 still and have 4K. I mean, this is all a real scenario. And I just think that there's still some potential with the ATSC 1.0 standard from a coding perspective. Unfortunately, not from a physical layer perspective, because 1.0 is really, really bad, which is why I think it would be best if the majority of stations across the country switched over to 3.0 for that physical layer, but definitely having some small community stations utilizing 1.0 with some innovative things, like even what we're seeing with Bridge News. I'd like to have Bridge News continue with their ABC broadcasts if that's working for them. They're making some money. You know, the consumers, the public are receiving all of these channels in ABC, and it's kind of a win-win. Why disrupt it if it's working well? You know, I see that as a great thing, especially for those smaller stations. And I get into that. I say there is a lot of development around using more advanced video and audio compression coding with ATSC 1.0, while still allowing the vast majority of consumer TVs and set top boxes made within the last 15 years the ability to use these more advanced technologies. And this is kind of also telling the FCC, you know, allow ATSC 1.0 to use more than just MPEG-2 video for their dot one. I think we're at the point where if your device can't use anything other than MPEG-2, you should probably upgrade your equipment. Or honestly, you're probably in such the minority that it would be less of a headache for the station owner to simply give you a $20 box for free to plug into your TV or to even buy you a new TV. You know, unfortunately, there's been some stories of how, you know, there's been a lot of people complaining that they aren't receiving any video stream because of the fact that their device doesn't have that decoding capability for these newer, you know, codecs like AVC, which is actually 21 years old. It's not very new, but again, this is the broadcast industry we're talking about. They do things a little slow, unfortunately. Basically, I think we're at the point where if you are still using something that can't even decode a 21-year-old codec, then it's time to upgrade. And FCC, you know, don't cling on to old crap from 30 years ago in the name of 5 people in a market being able to receive it. I go on to say K03 IMD in Eugene, Oregon is an example of a station that has successfully experimented with using the AVC and HEVC video codecs to innovate and improve what could be offered using the existing ATSC 1.0 data capacity of 19.39 megabits per second with multiple channels in 4K and over a dozen channels total. It should be noted that to date, not a single ATSC 3.0 station has any 4K services, but an ATSC 1.0 station has 4K services. This is important. The broadcasters are going to talk about how incredible the ATSC 3.0 standard is to broadcast all of these beautiful 4K services, all of these beautiful HDR and immersive audio experiences. And this is what I say to these broadcasters writing this in their comments. Where is it? An ATSC 1.0 station with less data capacity than your lighthouses have is able to implement 4K, yet you're not even implementing these things right now. You know, that doesn't look good. And I want to let the FCC know there is a station operating with the standard from the 1990s that is able to send 4K over that 1990s technology and have many devices receive it. Lots of devices in 2025 can receive as HEVC broadcasts. And yet, all of these ATSC 3.0 transmissions on the air don't really have much more going on for them at the video resolution and audio perspective. The audio perspective, there's just a few. Sinclair's been testing with that, but also it's fake immersive audio. Like, I'm sure Family Feud doesn't have 7.1.4 audio natively. So it's probably the standard 5.1 mix, and they're just upscaling it. And they can do that because it doesn't really take that much data capacity to throw in a couple extra little AC4 audio channels. And that's their way of kind of cheaply, in terms of data capacity, adding cooler looking stuff to their ATSC 3.0 signal. Don't get me wrong, it's cool. But, you know, some context to know, like, this is fake. They're just doing this because they basically can at this point. Should definitely be noted. I mean, you're not getting Blu-ray quality sound from the broadcast right now. Could that happen in the future? Sure. But again, it should be noted. LPTV and translator stations usually operate with smaller margins and may not have the necessary funds to transition completely over to ATSC 3.0 on their own. Allowing them flexibility to use the ATSC 1.0 standard while potentially using newer codecs would be a convenient middle ground for these station owners. In addition, as noted by the LPTV Broadcasters Association and station owner HC2 Broadcasting in their comments to this docket, there is the potential for deploying the innovative 3GPP LTE based 5G broadcast multicast technology in addition to ATSC 3.0, which could allow for the reception of broadcast signals on devices other than standard TVs and set top boxes with external antennas and move into a new, more modern frontier of direct to mobile broadcasts. DGR Technologies firmly believes that if the public airwaves are to have any future with younger generations, and this is important, guys, a direct to mobile or direct to device implementation is required, i.e., not necessarily using an external antenna. To be clear, ATSC 3.0 is a mobile standard because I'm sure all of these broadcast companies, Sinclair especially, will be quick to point out that ATSC 3.0 from the ground up is meant to be on a phone. I get that. Here's the problem though. However, it is seen as easier from a device implementation perspective to use a 3GPP broadcast standard on devices that already use the same fundamental 3GPP standard for unicast data transmission on cellular networks. And here's the crucial bit. DGR Technologies firmly believes that there is a market for both ATSC 3.0 and 5G broadcast transmissions to be on the air due to the unprecedented ubiquity of consumer electronics devices. I do not believe 5G broadcast and ATSC 3.0 are the AM stereo, because back when AM stereo was a thing, there were not really many options for stereo devices. Maybe you had one in your car, you had one at your house. That's really it. I mean, now we have laptops, tablets, smartphones, TVs, in-car entertainment systems. There are just so many other smartwatches for frickin' sake. I mean, there is so much smart fridges. I mean, everything. We are surrounded now by devices that consume binary code, binary bits. We are surrounded constantly by these devices. It wasn't like that back when AM stereo was a thing. So having multiple standards, maybe one that's better suited for mobile, maybe that's just easier to deploy on mobile, and one that's already been ingrained within the TV industry. Yeah, I see that as a real possibility if market drivers support it. ATSC 3.0 DRM and minimum SNR thresholds. For any station switching to ATSC 3.0 on the high VHF and UHF bands, because I already talked about this for the low VHF band, the Commission should consider mandating a maximum SNR threshold based on the resolution of the one mandated video stream. Again, going back to the idea of you've got one video stream that is mandated by the government, that should be there to serve the public at a reasonable SNR. In the current lighthouse phase, many stations have not adhered to the required 15 decibel SNR threshold to make their ATSC 3.0 video streams equal to the corresponding ATSC 1.0 broadcast standard. The FCC needs to know this. This is one of the most broken rules, and I actually didn't know that this was a thing. Shout out to Dr. 1394 on AVS Forum for pointing this out to me. He pointed out that there actually is a rule with the FCC that the ATSC 3.0 video streams, the channels, should be at the same SNR threshold or lower than ATSC 1.0. And that is not happening across the country right now. This station here in Buffalo, WNYO, that I'm next to, has a 21 decibel SNR, so it's 6 dB higher than what is required for ATSC 1.0. So they're literally making it 6 decibels harder to get in. So they are completely not following this at all. Same with WTVJ in Miami. They have a 19 decibel minimum SNR threshold because they're using LDM. It would have been 15 if they weren't using LDM. They wanted some more data capacity, even though they're not using it right now on PLP0. Kind of a waste, but we'll see what happens with that. But they have a 19 decibel SNR, so that station isn't technically following it either. And I go into that. I say, for instance, after a room was made on their transmission for data casting, WNYO TV in Buffalo, New York, had its minimum receive SNR raised to approximately 21 dB in order for an antenna user to receive any video streams. Again, they're broadcasting I think it's a 9 dB SNR PLP0, but that PLP0 is just for data casting. That doesn't have any TV streams. So I don't know if like their lawyers at the company are like, we're below 15, we're at 9, but it's like, no, that 9 doesn't have any video streams. The 21 dB layer does, not the 9. So it's about being able to receive the public service at that threshold. This is about 6 dB higher than an equivalent ATSC 1.0 signal and has made reception in this area where I'm at right now more difficult. This isn't just a mathematical assessment, this is my actual real life assessment when testing that station in the area, and the assessment of many antenna users that raised these same concerns to me. And I've gotten a lot of complaints where, as soon as they switched over to 21 dB, there were a bunch of Canadians and there were a few people emailing me saying all of a sudden I'm not getting in the ATSC 3.0 transmission. I even have the A3SA DRM stuff. I got a TV, it's connected to the internet, and I still can't receive it. I'm like, yeah, they changed the transmission around a little bit to where you actually basically need a Yagi antenna where you're at and you'll marginally receive it. Not a very good situation to be in. This is not how we should be doing things. I don't know why they're deploying it like this. They could be using LDM, they could be doing a lot, but they're not. And it's kind of unfortunate to see the way that this stuff is being rolled out. The ATSC 3.0 standard also offers more capacity and much better compression, video compression. So the commission should consider a lower dynamic SNR threshold that isn't tied to what ATSC 1.0 could supply at a technical level arbitrarily, but one that meets the potential of the ATSC 3.0 standard. So what am I saying? I'm saying just because ATSC 1.0 has a 15 decibel SNR, don't mandate that the one video stream with ATSC 3.0 also have 15 decibels, because 15 is actually relatively high. ATSC 1.0 doesn't have a very low SNR receive SNR threshold. It's got a decently high. I mean, it's not super high, but it's not low either. And especially since ATSC 3.0 has a lot of, capability to change its, receive SNR threshold, you should base it based on the dynamicism of what is actually being broadcast. Is it 480p? Then maybe it should have a lower, maybe no more than 5 decibel minimum SNR requirement, which I'm going to get into in a second. In addition, the commission should consider whether the mandated one video stream be free of A3SA DRM encryption. I strongly believe that they should consider that the one mandated video stream not have any A3SA DRM encryption, and whether any channels that have this A3SA DRM encryption be counted as ancillary services. Let's say you've got 5 channels on your ATSC 3.06 megahertz transmission, and one of them is the mandated without encryption, and the other 4 do have encryption. Should those be counted as ancillary services because it requires some third-party encryption technology in order to decrypt it? I honestly think it should be counted as an ancillary service, which means that it should be taxed as such. And the FCC should collect duties based on the fact that they're using this encryption on these other services. Although many devices, including the ADTH Next Gen TV Box, Zinwell ZAT600B, and GT Media HD TV Converter X1 playback channels encrypted with A3SA DRM without an internet connection, as demonstrated by WNY over the air on YouTube, there are still many devices that require an internet connection to handle a channel that contains A3SA DRM encryption, like the ADTH Next Gen TV USB dongle and the Zapperbox lineup of ATSC 3.0 products. This raises public safety concerns during times with internet outages. In addition, there are other ATSC 3.0 capable devices that do not support A3SA encryption at all, such as the GT Media HD TV Mate and Silicon Dust HD Home Run Flex 4K. And this is where I made a small mistake. I said the cheapest DRM capable devices, ADTH Next Gen TV USB dongle and GT Media HD TV Mate, are all unable to handle DRM without an internet connection. Now, technically, is that statement accurate? Yeah, because they both cannot handle DRM without an internet connection. But what I meant to add is that not only can the GT Media HD TV Mate not handle DRM without an internet connection, it can't handle it at all. It has no function at all to handle DRM, and that is a very affordable option. And again, DRM adds cost, it adds complexity. This is not good, especially for the idea of making services available as cheaply as possible to the public. It's just the complete opposite of that. This has serious implications for elderly individuals on fixed incomes or those below the poverty line that rely on over the air TV services and would purchase an ATSC 3.0 device with the smallest impact on their finances. Think about it. If they're on Amazon and they're searching for an ATSC 3.0 product so that in 2028 they could start watching their free broadcast services again, they may find that the GT Media stick is the best option for their current financial situation. They go plug it in, they use it, and unfortunately, they can't play anything back because it is not blessed by the broadcasters. Now, if their mandated video stream had no DRM encryption, then that would be a lot better. People would be able to buy anything that's available and know that they could at least get whatever is mandated by the government. There is a sizable portion of elderly over-the-air TV users that do not have an internet connection, and a sizable portion of low-income over-the-air TV users with no proper home internet service provider, with sole internet utilization from cellular operators on a smartphone. This is based on the experience of WNY over the air installing antennas for consumers in New York State. So you almost have to think that the people that are relying on services like this, there's a lot of people that care about home theater setups and having the best quality for their NFL games that have the money to pay for an internet service provider. There's a small, very niche segment of society that uses these services that don't have stuff like that still in 2025. And there's others that simply just can't afford it. So you have to have that context when you're thinking of policy decisions that will impact potentially thousands and thousands of Americans that rely on this every day. That being said, the commission should consider the following as a way to ensure consumers have a lessened impact with DRM encryption and have maximum receive SNRs that are accessible for the commission's one mandated channel. This is what I propose for high VHF and UHF full power in Class A ATSC 3.0 stations. So this is very similar to the article that I wrote, except I changed the 480p to less than 720p to be 5 dB. This is just a general representation of what I would believe would be a good kind of gauge for where an SNR threshold should be at for the one mandated video stream, given the technical abilities of ATSC 3.0. And this uses such little data capacity, even if you had let's say you had a 540p channel and the transmission was mandated to be less than 5 decibels, that would still use up extremely little data capacity resources. All of these could be implemented to use extremely little data capacity resources. So this is not harmful at all to have further ambitions of innovating with the additional spectrum. It's just that I think that since, broadcasters get free spectrum, that there should be just some simple requirements for the one channel that they're literally on the public airwaves to do for in the first place. And I said that this balances the consumer and business interests, going back to the core FCC value of meaningfully serving the public with one TV channel while balancing the need for broadcasters to protect their valuable content with DRM encryption and use their valuable public license for new innovative implementations like broadcast internet. I don't want to punish broadcasters for using DRM. I want individuals to use the public airwaves and not have to worry about DRM necessarily by having at least one channel that's available to them at any given time that doesn't have DRM. But I think that if broadcasters want to use DRM on some other PLPs, they should be able to, just in the way that broadcasters were able to send paid encrypted TV channels using the remaining space. They should be able to do that with free DRM services. And I also think, unfortunately, that the DRM argument is a failing argument because, unfortunately, we're at the point where the media industry, where Hollywood and the television broadcast industry, they just have in their heads that DRM is this magic bullet for them. And legally, they like the protections that it has, and I get that. It sucks for consumers, and that's why I want to just make sure that high quality services are still available, because if we don't allow broadcasters to use any DRM, I feel like what would happen is the quality of the programming that would be on the public airwaves would be diminished even more than what it's currently at. Think about the fact that Peacock and Paramount Plus and all these streaming services have some pretty decently valued content, whereas the TV broadcast signals tend to carry a lot more lower quality content, and it's been getting lower quality over the years. And really, the only thing that's staying there is the NFL and some other sports. So I think with that context in mind, you have to think, I want to be able to balance having some sort of service for the public that doesn't have DRM, while also acknowledging that unfortunately the media landscape loves encryption technology. And how do we make sure that, stuff like this remains free to the public for those that want to spend a little bit extra to get these DRM certified devices? And for those that want to have a basic over the air experience, they should still be able to do that with at least one channel that doesn't have DRM encryption. Now on to the ATSC 3.0 tuner mandate. DGR Technologies urges the Commission, under the authority granted to the Commission by the All Channel Receiver Act of 1962 and codified in 47 U.S.C. subsection 303S, to mandate that all television sets manufactured for sale in the United States have an ATSC 3.0 tuner starting in, 2026, in order for consumers to have adequate access to our public airwaves. I'd like to clarify this 2026 a little bit more, because 2026 is a very fast approaching date. I realize that. What I meant by 2026 is a date in 2026 where TV sets manufactured past, let's say, late 2026, November 2026, October 2026, December 2026, a TV set that is manufactured past a later, let's say Q4 2026, that those sets beginning then have an ATSC 3.0 tuner. And guess what? If the TV set manufacturer doesn't want to have that and doesn't want to market their device as a TV, then market your device as a monitor and don't put one in. But I do think that there needs to be more of a push. I do think that there needs to be more consumer devices that can adequately receive the public airwaves. If we want to be able to do a transition, I just think that having a tuner mandate the same year that you're switching the broadcast isn't fair to consumers, because what if somebody buys a TV literally right when they're switching the broadcast over, or right before the mandate, and it's a brand new TV? Now, let's say it's a 10-year lifespan. They've got for 10 years this TV that's not going to work with their broadcast signals. So, giving a couple more months, a few more months of a buffer between, let's say, February 2028 and let's say Q4 2026 would give, consumers a little bit more time to adjust, and also is late enough where if the FCC acted fast, which I guess, if they act fast, this could be done. If they don't act fast, I could see this not going through, because this wouldn't give TV set manufacturers enough time to do this. But, it needs to be done. There needs to be adequate reception for the public airwaves in order to use it. I mean, I just think from a holistic perspective, if you're selling a TV set in the United States, you should be mandated to include a piece of technology that can adequately receive all of what's available on the TV band of the public airwaves. That should just be how it is. People can disagree with me on that, but this is a public resource that we're all supposed to, share and, have for emergencies and utilize. I just think that, as a condition of being in the US market, that should be a condition of being here. The Commission should also consider whether receivers should be capable of spatial diversity, or MIMO, as outlined in the ATSC specifications, as this has the potential to greatly increase the total data capacity of an ATSC 3.0 broadcast signal. In addition, the Commission should consider whether other appropriate action should be taken for 3GPP LTE-based 5G broadcast multicast technology for mobile devices that already include the fundamental 3GPP specifications. So, not necessarily that you should mandate it, but you should look into whether or not, mobile devices should come with a 5G broadcast specification if the FCC deems that that is important as a backup for emergency scenarios in the event that, this 5G technology from the 3GPP is deployed more. And about MIMO, just going back to MIMO briefly, MIMO is extremely important because you can, in some implementations, double data capacity. That could do a lot for really, really getting more out of the public airwaves and having more services for the public. And not using MIMO is very not 2020s. Every single other technology, this Wi-Fi access point that's sitting here is using MIMO every single time I connect to it. The cell phone that I'm currently recording this, video on is receiving MIMO every second with the 3GPP 5G cellular unicast specification. MIMO is just a fact of everyday life. Pretty much with any modern radio technology, MIMO is a factor of everyday life. So, having TVs be able to receive MIMO transmissions, I think is important. And does that mean 2F connectors? It's up for the FCC to decide whether or not something's baked in or you plug in an external antenna. ATSC 3.0 spectral capacity. As alluded to earlier, ATSC 3.0 has considerably more spectral capacity, especially when considering layered division multiplexing and multiple input, multiple output, MIMO. The commission should continue to consider the fundamental use of television broadcast spectrum to be the provision of free over-the-air television service. However, as live television declines in viewership, a requirement for simply providing live TV service with the backdrop of ATSC 3.0's capabilities is outdated thinking, in my opinion. Instead, the commission should keep its one TV channel rule, refer to figure 1 above, and consider whether to add a 51% majority total data capacity requirement on services to be freely available to the general public as public services. So I am saying that yes, have your mandated one TV channel, but also that because ATSC 3.0 has such great data capacity potential, that allow broadcasters to send other things other than live TV channels. If it's video on demand content, if it's websites, if it's other use cases, allow them to send it as long as it's available openly to the public that could be accessed on a device capable of receiving ATSC 3.0. It should be allowed. This could be live TV channels, live audio streams, broadcast caching, video on demand content, website caching, etc. The condition should be that this 51% portion is provided as freely accessible to the general public, not private organizations with services that are paid. The remaining 49% should be open to additional services if the broadcaster chooses and subject to FCC fees. So I personally believe that if 51% of their 6 megahertz RF channel is being used to provide services to the public, that in my opinion, that is a good use of the public airwaves. And if they want to do a minority of that bandwidth with things that are for businesses or for the private sector or things that aren't directly tied or services that are not directly tied to everyday people receiving things, that they should be able to do that. A lot of you may disagree with me on this, and I think it's important to realize right now what the current reality is of ATSC 1.0 broadcasts. I've noticed, especially too, with a lot of HC2 stations, and I'm singling out HC2, but it's not just them, it's a lot of other broadcasters, that they send transmissions with a lot of null packets, right? So if 13 megabits per second is TV channels, and then 6.39 megabits per second is a bunch of zeros, how is that in the public interest? I would rather have HC2 use 13 megabits per second for providing services to the public, and that 6.39 megabits per second be given to businesses. And maybe that can help pay for their over the air TV ambitions for consumers and allow them to have a higher quality of service with the services that they give out to the public, and allow them to have more of a reason to stick and be a broadcaster long term if they have, a good thing going with that additional data capacity. And ATSC 1.0 can't really do that. ATSC 1.0 can't really provide a good data casting experience. So switching over to ATSC 3.0 and doing the same thing, just transposed with the backdrop of 3.0's Spectral layer and its efficiency with that, I think all of this is just really good context to have when considering this. This 49% portion could consist of paid channels, business to business data casting, etc. if the broadcaster chooses. Lastly, the commission should consider whether rules should be implemented to mandate lowering the modulation encode rate or rates of a PLP or PLPs if a small but significant amount of data capacity given the chosen parameters is available but not being fully utilized in order to make over-the-air reception easier for consumers and not needlessly more difficult. Why do I say this? Let's see. There's a station that comes to mind, folks. That station is WEYS-LD in Miami, Florida. They have one 480p channel. That's it. They've got like 2 megabits per second of HEVC data capacity and AC3 audio, not AC4. And I'll get into that in a later video. It's licensing reasons why a lot of these smaller low power stations are actually using AC3 and not AC4. That's a different topic. But they're allocating a couple megabits per second of data capacity. They've got like an additional 17 megabits per second that is not being used. And unfortunately, what that means is given their mod cod configurations, they have a 16 decibel minimum receive SNR and they have a single 480p channel. Yeah, that is a waste. It shouldn't take 16 decibels. It shouldn't take a 16 decibel receive SNR to receive a single 480p channel. That is just bad engineering. That is a bad implementation. That is just overall just bad. Like we can't have that. So if it's something drastic like that, there should be a rule that says just you can keep doing what you're doing, just lower your transmission so that it's easier to receive. Lower it. It's not that difficult. And that is the end of my submission. Is there anything that you would have added? There's a lot that I could have said in addition. I basically didn't have the time to do everything that I wanted to say, but this was the main points that I wanted to bring up. Anyway, what do you guys think? Leave your comments down in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.